Hey man, there's a kind of presence that lingers long after you've walked away. Not because of what you gave her, but because of what you didn't. Most men try to impress a woman by giving her every answer, every detail, every part of their personality up front. They explain themselves. They over-communicate. They try to prove they're different by handing her a full emotional blueprint on day one. But the truth is, what makes you memorable isn't what you reveal, it's what you hold back. The most powerful energy a man can carry is the ability to leave a woman not with certainty, but with questions. Because questions create loops, and loops create attachment. When she can't quite figure you out, when she leaves the conversation wondering what you really meant, what you really feel, what you're really about, that tension doesn't fade, it simmers, and long after you've gone quiet, she's still engaged. Not with your words, but with your energy. That's the art of being unforgettable. You don't satisfy her curiosity, you stimulate it. You give her just enough to feel intrigued, and just little enough that her mind starts chasing what her heart doesn't fully understand. You do this not by being fake or calculated, but by being deliberately selective. When she asks about your past, you don't spill everything. You drop a line like, "Let's just say I've learned the hard way who to trust," and then change the subject. That single sentence opens an emotional loop she can't close. Why? Because now she's filling in the blanks. She's imagining your story. She's creating a narrative about you, one that her emotions are now attached to. And the narrative we create is always stronger than the facts we're given. This is where most guys fail. They mistake transparency for connection. They think the more they share, the more she'll feel close. But what they don't realize is when you give her everything, she stops wondering. She stops working for emotional depth. She stops leaning in. And when she stops leaning in, the desire fades. But the man who keeps her just slightly off balance, the man who answers a deep question with a smirk and a change of subject, that man becomes a mystery her mind wants to solve. You leave her with questions by staying unpredictable, not chaotic, just non-linear. One day you're playful, the next day you're serious. One moment you're deeply present, the next you're detached. You're warm, but not always available. You're engaged, but not fully explainable. And that contrast, that shifting rhythm, it makes her question where she stands with you. And that question creates investment, because now she's not coasting, she's chasing clarity. And that chase is where real emotional bonds are formed. You don't need to say much. It's the energy behind what you don't say that speaks volumes. It's in the pause before you answer, the smile that doesn't come with explanation, the eye contact that says, "I'm listening," but also says, "You'll never fully know what I'm thinking." That's what stirs something in her, because now you're not just another guy spilling his life story to win her affection. You're a self-contained storm. She feels the weather change when you walk in, but she can't predict the forecast. And that emotional unpredictability, it keeps her hooked. Even when she asks direct questions, you answer in a way that opens more space. Why did you leave your last relationship? You say, sometimes two people grow, just not in the same direction. No details, no drama, just the truth wrapped in mystery. And that mystery plants a seed in her mind. What does that mean? What was he like? What happened? And the more she asks herself those questions, the more emotionally engaged she becomes. Because now she's not just talking to you, she's trying to decode you. Women don't bond with men who are easy to figure out. They bond with the ones who force them to feel. And uncertainty is one of the fastest ways to trigger those feelings. Not because you're playing games, but because you're not giving away your emotional map. You're making her feel her way through your energy. And that process, that emotional searching, that's what builds real emotional gravity. Because now, she doesn't just want your attention, she wants your story. And that desire becomes the reason she keeps showing up. You also have to be okay with silence. Most men fill every gap in the conversation because they fear losing momentum, but when you're grounded, you let the silences stretch. You let her sit in them, you let her wonder, and that wondering creates mental real estate. She starts building versions of you in her mind, not because you misled her, but because you refuse to be completely seen. That refusal makes your energy stick, because now she has to keep coming back to get a fuller picture. And here's the beauty of it. The less you give, the more she attaches. Not in a toxic way, but in a motivated way. She starts bringing more of herself. She starts being more curious, more emotionally present, more open, because now she's trying to close the loop you left open. She's trying to answer the questions you never directly raised. And that desire to understand you, that desire to feel seen by the man who sees but doesn't speak too much, that's what makes you live in her mind longer than any guy who poured his soul out on the first date. Eventually, she'll begin to crave emotional certainty, not because you withheld love, but because you never handed it to her on a silver platter. You didn't beg her to stay. You didn't force your vulnerability into her lap. You made her earn it by showing up, by staying consistent, by proving her intentions. And in that slow unraveling, she realizes something most women never get to feel in modern relationships: curiosity. You've become a slow drip story she wants to keep reading. And that's what keeps you in her thoughts. Not because you said everything, but because you didn't. Here's the power move. Most men don't realize when she asks for clarity and you give her something poetic instead of precise, it triggers her emotions. Why don't you talk about your past more? And you say, some chapters feel better when they stay closed. Now you didn't lie, you didn't deflect, you just reframed. And that poetic resistance, it makes her feel something. It's beautiful, it's masculine, it's mature. You're not hiding, you're just honoring your depth. And now, instead of feeling like she's being blocked, she feels like she's being invited, slowly, deliberately, into your world. The man who can remain partially hidden is a man who commands the imagination. And the imagination is far more powerful than reality. When she doesn't know everything, she creates possibilities. She fills in blanks. She obsesses, not because you're playing games, but because you didn't need to give her everything to keep her interested. You let the mystery speak louder than the monologue. You let your stillness carry more emotional weight than any story ever could. And that quiet tension, that not knowing, it binds her to your presence without you having to raise your voice or reveal your wounds. This is the difference between being entertaining and being engraved. Entertaining men tell stories, perform, share all, hoping to build a fast connection. But the man who gets engraved into her memory, he holds more than he reveals. He watches more than he speaks. He leads with energy, not exposition. And even after a simple interaction, she walks away thinking, what's his story? What does he believe? Where has he been? What's he holding back? And those questions become emotional hooks. Hooks that deepen without needing effort from you. But this only works if you're authentic about it. You're not trying to act mysterious. You genuinely move with purpose. You've done the inner work. You're not confused. You're just in no rush to be understood. That's the art. You're not hiding. You're simply not oversharing. Because you know something most men don't. Intimacy that's slowly earned is infinitely more powerful than intimacy that's immediately dumped. When she realizes that your emotional world is something sacred, something she must earn access to, it makes every small reveal feel profound. Women long for emotional depth, but they crave the pursuit of it more. And the moment you let her pursue your depth at her own pace, in her own rhythm, without you shoving it at her, you let her experience a form of voluntary vulnerability. That's where emotional safety lives. Not in giving her answers, but in letting her reach for them. That reaching is what makes her care. That stretch, that chase, that subtle uncertainty, it creates bonding through discovery. And she'll keep coming back, not because you asked, but because she's still trying to finish the sentence you never finished. You also give her space to share more of herself, because you're not trying to dominate every emotional moment with your own story. Your quietness becomes an open field where she fills the silence. She opens up first. She asks more questions. She brings more of her world into the conversation. Because you haven't flooded the space with your own details, there's room for her to step forward. And when she does, that emotional investment runs deeper than anything you could have forced. Because now she chose to build the bridge between you. And when she does get pieces of you, when you finally share a meaningful detail, a subtle emotion, a past experience, you watch it land completely differently. Why? Because she earned it. It wasn't tossed at her. It was handed over, slowly, quietly, like a secret. And women treasure what they earn. They value what feels rare. That small glimpse into your truth, that feels real. It feels weighty. It creates impact. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was deliberate. That's what separates you from every man she's ever met who said too much, too soon, too desperately. At the end of the day, this art isn't about deception, it's about discipline. the discipline to let her wonder, the discipline to be present without being predictable, the discipline to let silence build tension instead of rushing to fix it. And when she feels that, when she realizes that your restraint isn't distance but value control, she changes. She stops assuming, she starts watching, she starts asking, she starts fighting for the answers. You'll only give when you decide the moment is right. And in that space, you've become unforgettable. So remember this, man, you don't always need to impress her with facts, stories, and explanations. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is leave her with a question she can't stop thinking about. Something in your tone, a look you didn't explain, a sentence that ended just before it was complete. That lingering thought, that's what stays with her. That's what makes her wake up thinking about you. Because while other men gave her answers, you gave her something far more powerful, a reason to keep coming back.